Today we'll look at another New Zealand landscape, and I'm interested today in a little bit of extra details, a little bit of um, story building. So we've got a camper with a couple of canoes, I don't know, surfing boards, paddle boards, whatever they are. We've got a couple of figures if we want to include them. Most importantly, a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of nuances and how we can make our landscapes a little bit more exciting, give it something different or something special. The idea is that we practice working into smaller scale um, kind of shapes and details, but at the same time, how we can achieve them without fiddling in too tiny little things, how we can see bigger shapes within smaller defined elements. Let's say the camper, the wheels, the windows, whatever there might be the details, okay? But we'll start with the classic big structure of the painting. So we have quite a lot of sky, but we just trimmed our composition, so probably up to about there, okay? So we have the height roughly twice, maybe a little bit shorter than the actual piece. So the height is twice comes in into the width, maybe a little bit shorter here. Now we can decide if we want to include these tail of the canoes. I think I'm probably just going to stick with the camper and the canoes. So I might just have a little bit of extra space. I'm really happy with some of the mountains to be included, a bit of water, some of the foreground of the shore, there's some grasses, a bit of sand. So let's have a look at those main three elements: sky, water, foreground. So I'm going to have some white, ochre, and tiny bit of violet. Let's make the color a little bit diluted. Make it a tiny bit more runnier. And let's identify the big shapes. Now, there is one way of looking at it. If we haven't quite scaled up our photograph, maybe actually we'll start slightly differently here. So if we haven't quite trimmed our photograph, this is my original size photograph. And I'm mainly interested in the camper and the boats and the trailer. I'm going to introduce them first to my painting, to my composition. So if I'll block them and plan their position and a rough size, okay, and I'll just see if that's going to be too big, too small, if it's going to be enough, not enough, okay, where that's going to be, how big the scale of the boats are going to be. Again, just roughly planning them. They're going to be more on the left, a little bit more on the right. I think that might be a little bit easier for us to get started and adjust than the sky and the water, because there are key elements. Maybe what's the gap between the camper and the boat? Okay, let's get maybe the proportions right. Maybe a little bit longer here. Okay, the boats are going to be, if I'll divide them into half, might give me a little bit better scale. Okay, what about if I'll make them tiny bit bigger? Quite like the space here. Maybe if I'll make it tiny bit bigger. Okay, so my planning. We'll decide, is the camper taller than the boat? Camper without the extra boards. Okay, how tall the extra load on top is going to be. Okay, maybe that will be removed. If your lines are drying, it's okay. You can just use a little bit more lighter, darker lines on top as you're sketching. Just try to think of overall big shapes. That's why I put the two big boxes first. Okay, maybe I'll just now play with a little bit of the shapes to see how how much space, to look at the gaps, what type of shapes overall will start happening. Okay, I think that might be the one. Okay, maybe a tiny bit of details on the van by putting small amount of, let's say, maybe the tires, yeah, some of the gaps, maybe the larger size windows. Again, it will give me a sense of proportion, if I'm on the right scale or not. Okay. All right. And after that, so that's roughly my sketch, my plan here. And after this, I'll add my sky and my mountains. Let's do the shoreline first. Again, that's an easy one. Just behind the camper. Okay, we've got some wheels here as well for the trailer. Okay, so it'll be all dark, loads of shadows under the camper and under, right, this tire looks in the wrong place. Okay, so we'll be under the window somewhere there. Okay, they might look a little bit bigger, but by the time I'll paint them black, they'll be in the right places. Right, so the line for the shore maybe will be just tiny bit somewhere in between the windows and the bottom line of the camper, maybe, but somewhere here and there. The water and the mountains are almost in line with the top of the camper. It doesn't look too exciting because it just will look like in one line. So I think I'm going to drop it a little. I think I'm going to drop it gently lower. And what I'll do, I'll raise my mountains. I think I'm going to make my mountains a little bit higher than they actually are. So the top one here, I quite like that dark one. Maybe that will come out somewhere here. And the other ones, I'll exaggerate them. And maybe move these ones a little bit across because I've got some extra space here for them. That's maybe another dark one there. Okay, so I've made my mountains higher. And then whatever I think there's a little extra island or something else a little bit darker. That will be fine. And then the rest of the space will be my sky. I can also decide if I want to keep, which mountains I want to keep taller. These ones or these ones. Okay, what about if I'll drop these ones down? Let's have a quick look. If I'll drop them down, they might be competing with my boards. Okay, maybe I'll start with painting them lower with introducing loads of light colors for the clouds. But if the range doesn't looks too similar, the height looks a little bit strange, then I might pick them up. Okay, I think this one wouldn't come off now. Okay, so that will be my initial stage of the sketch. Right, so a range of flat brushes will be really, really good for the details later on. I'll start, however, with a flat, reasonable big brush with the sky. Now, because my initial idea that I'm going to drop this mountain down, and this is going to be the higher one, I would like to keep some of the sky, blue chunks of the sky, and then which will balance the darkness of my higher mountains. So some blue parts of the chunks of the sky will balance maybe something diagonally with my bigger mountains here. So let's load our brush with some white and phthalo blue. I also have some ultramarine and tiny bit of violet on from my other palette. So let's see if we can make a bit of a sky going. I'll start with the blue itself, so phthalo blue and white. And I'm going to try to find, okay, that looks quite light. So let's put a tiny bit more darker blue here. Because the higher we are painting the sky, the top of the piece, the darker it should be. The lower to the horizon will go, the blue will be a little bit paler. So that might be my darker blue. Okay, let's just develop some of the patterns of how much of the sky I can see there. Okay.
I think Judy's trying to get onto the call.
Just using tiny bit of phthalo blue and ultramarine, and tiny bit more higher parts of my blue sky here. Okay, and then blending it all with my existing blue. And if anything is quite low here, I'll have tiny bit more white and maybe add extra white to the lower area of my sky, closer to the horizon. Maybe a tiny bit more white. Maybe somewhere here. Maybe even more white. So then we've got a range of the blues coming through. Range of tones. Don't want it having a line, so I might just give it a little smudge. Smudge, I could have done it with the paints, with a brush. Okay, so I've got a rough change of darkness here. Okay. Tiny bit more here as well. I think just looks like a little bit of a rough edge for my blue, so I'll just soften it up here. Okay. And let's work into some whiter clouds. Let's work into some whiter clouds. Let's just give you a moment to finish your blue. All right, so I'm going for violet, ochre, and ultramarine. Trying to get the overall clouds, the darkest, well, kind of the medium tones of the clouds. And because of my very dark background color, my very pale white initially looked too strong, too bright, but now it looks a bit better. Okay, so I'm getting some gaps here covered. I'll come a bit more close to the range of the mountains, although the tones might not be the right ones. I just want to get something paler to identify the shapes of them. Okay, that might be a little silly looking shape. Okay, if I'll put it a tiny bit darker here, might give me an idea where it might be later. So I just want to see, that doesn't do it. I just want to see the silhouette of the mountains a little bit stronger to see that's the shape I want for my clouds. I'm just comparing them all together. Let's mix that color again as I'm running out of it. Okay, so all of that is disappearing. I'm gonna come close to the boats. Okay, that's gonna come out a little lighter, so I'm going to see where that lighter version of color will be settled in better. Yeah, that's actually probably a good placement for it, as the lightest clouds are staying here and a little bit more close to the horizon in small sections. Okay. So that's a nice big space. Let's go tiny bit more with a similar darkness. Maybe somewhere here. Just to give the volume to our clouds. I'll come again close to the silhouette of the mountains to make a decision that we moved them across, but we want to see exactly where they're going to be now placed, or at least our initial response to where they're going to be, so we can have time to make the final decision. Okay, that looks okay. Let's fill that one in. And let's get some lighter color. So all I'm doing, I'm just adding white to my ochre, violet and blue. A little bit more white. So the clouds don't have a super strong light behind them. It's not an overly sunny day. It looks a little bit of an overcast day. But it's okay if you were to end up with a very sunny day. So that's okay as well. Just building up some of the highlights here. And I want to mix some of my light, a bit more gentler. Don't want to have too many sharp border lines. Okay, and the bottom, I've got some lovely shadows coming up. Shadows are individual little clouds coming up. So I can paint in between them to create some light. And maybe increase the lightness as the work develops. And we start comparing the amount of light in the sky and elsewhere. Okay, so maybe a tiny bit more highlights on the smaller clouds. So I'm just finding some smaller clouds. I'm going to put a little bit of highlights on them. That looks an odd shaped cloud, but I only found out that now when I start putting my highlights. Means I can come back to some of those gray purple colors, or maybe work with some of the whites, blues around it to find a better shape. Some beautiful light coming somewhere here. Let's have it slightly more. Okay, stretched out here. So we've got some peeping light on the tops of our clouds. I think that's a very wet area. Any highlights coming up on these clouds? And now I can compare the light on the left-hand side of the painting with the right-hand side of the painting. And I can definitely see that some of this one could be lighter. Now my paint is not as diluted as well, so it settles in, I think, better. And I think the light close to the horizon could be even stronger. I'm adding tiny bit of ochre to my existing color of ochre, violet and blue and white, where the loads of white was about. So I think in this area I'm going to have a little bit extra ochre, using my flat a little bit more, my brush a little bit more flat way around to create dynamics of diagonal clouds. They must be quite far away, a bit more elongated, when these ones, fluffy ones, maybe a little bit closer to us. Tiny bit more white as well. If you're building up medium tones, let's say I don't want this one to be too light, so I'll want to bring a bit of water here, and then those areas don't have as much focus in comparison to my diagonal clouds. I think that diagonal a bit too strong. Maybe I'll introduce a bit more shallow diagonal. All I'm doing is coming back to my initial combination of colors. If I need to fix anything, violet, ultramarine and ochre with white. Okay, it's a little bit too dark. So the different dynamics of the clouds, much more narrower and pointy ones in comparison to round and fluffy ones, tells us how far they are from us or how close they are to us. Okay, let's just build up some of these ones here again. Now I understand their shapes and dynamics a bit more, how they follow in and distributing their weight. That's quite exciting. Tiny bit of light maybe coming up here as well. Soft edges, sharp edges. So soft edges, I'm adding tiny bit of water on my finger and smudging it. Tiny bit more stronger paint, and keeping a sharp edge is good as well. Right, I think I'm ready for a tiny bit more extra blue, and then I'll see where we are. Okay, just looking for any more light. Okay, I think this is just dry and tiny bit darker than I expected it to dry. So I'm just tiny bit highlight, topping up the extra white within my blue violety gray. Okay, the dynamics of it is good. Okay, well that one is good. Okay, I'll just put it a tiny bit more this way. Okay, because I moved my mountains, I need to improvise on my other possible solutions for the sky here. Okay, right, let's come back to the blue. If you've got plenty of that blue left, you might not need to fix anything. I have gone over my blue maybe a bit too much, so let's just find some of them of the space back. Tiny bit more water to the brush, so the strokes will become slightly fresher. I need to make sure that my cloud shapes will stay exciting. Okay, I'm going lower, so I need to make my blue lighter. Very gently, very, very gently. I'm mixing it in my palette. Sometimes it doesn't happen to mix it quickly enough. I'll have to take my time and make sure that I do arrive to the darkness of the colors I want. Shaping up my clouds here. Maybe little gaps, tiny little marks. Again, looking for some maybe shapes. Trying to find if the shape is looking a bit odd, can we, if it becomes a repetitive shape, can we do anything for it to it to avoid it? A tiny bit more white again as I'm going further down. That tiny bit of change in light. And I'm trying to make it not just a perfect light shape just landed. I'm just merging it with the previous blue across the other areas. Okay, maybe something like this for now. That looks like a dramatic wave. Let's just soften that one out. That's better. I haven't quite finished the edges of my clouds, but I really like the color of my sky. And I think I need to have some reference from my sky color to my mountains at the background. So I'll use a similar color of phthalo blue, and I'll increase the amount of ultramarine in it. And maybe let's put a few strokes of darker blue across for these mountains. Okay, that looks quite strong. Maybe a hint of violet and ochre. So I still want to have a blue feel for it, but violet and ochre will cool it off. It will just make it a tiny bit more grayish blue. Okay, it's a good color, but maybe a bit too dark. So a tiny bit more lighter. Let's do a block of it. There's some snow on the peaks. So far I'm going to paint the whole shape, the whole silhouette of the mountains before I start doing any textures, details. Okay, that one's there and this one's going to be coming up. Again, I can paint it over the boards just to decide where my boards are going to be later on. I think this edge could be a tiny bit higher. Quite a shallow tops. There's a lot of the mountains, big range of things in there. Right. Now let's introduce a tiny bit more lighter tones on the mountains. Same combination of colors, ochre, violet, but small amount of blue. And that will allow me to have some of the ridges here. While my paint is, my blue is a little wet, I can smudge some of it. I can smudge some of them with the existing color. Some, not gonna mix it all. I'm trying to make these segments not looking like a fence, so they're not all the same in length, in size, and appearance. But I'm more interested in creating the ridges, okay? Something like this for now. So that little bit of warmth from violet and ochre gives a nice contrast with the blue. Right, that's will be good. Some of these ones need to have stronger contrast. So painting them back, and I can paint the blue now back where it's been. A stronger blue to create again, to reconstruct my initial ridges. Change the variety of widths, change the dynamics if needed. Okay, so they're there. Very tempted to go into finishing the sky now, but I also have very, very dark tones of the mountains and the little islands on the left, right, and kind of in the center at the back of the lake, and also similar type of darkness under the camper and under the boats in a trailer. I think if I'll identify that first, that will give me an idea how light I should be going in the sky. And if I've got my mountains light enough, dark enough. So I think I'm going to test it out before I'll go for my extra whites, where my extra darks are going to be. For that, I'll go for exactly the same color range, but I will have close my emerald green. That might be one extra color. So I'll mix I'll mix emerald green. I'll mix emerald green or any of your greens with some violet. Let's have a look what's going to happen. And small amount of white. The proportion of it need to be look in such a way so we can just about see a bit of green as a dominant color, but it's not just pure green. Okay, maybe something like this. Tiny bit more light. So I'll go for a lighter version of it first before I go super dark. I think maybe my mountains at the back are too dark. Okay, let's do some of this one. Tiny bit more violet and emerald green. Less white now. I just see how that darkness will appear. Now we don't want it black. On the photograph it appears quite black, but we don't really want it black. I can paint over camper. I can even do the super dark windows as big blocks for now. They might not be the right sizes yet. I just want to follow that darkness across the painting. Some trees there. Maybe some trees somewhere here. And where the water line is going to be, just making sure we can track it across. Some shadows for the canoes, just for now. Gives me a rough, again, balance of dark and light tones. Dark and light tones. Exactly the same color, violet and emerald green. I think I don't even have much white in it now left. I'm interested into the darkness. And I'll dilute this paint, this combination of paint, with some water to have very runny texture, as I just want to have it as a plan where my overall shape of darkness is going to be. So if I'll start painting tiny details of the van first, I'll lose it. I need to see the overall darkness of the mountains in comparison to the shapes within the vehicles and under them. Definitely under the tires here. Maybe some figures, maybe not. Okay, now definitely tells me that my blue mountains are way too dark. Way too dark. That's okay, because I've got acrylic paints. I can come back to slightly lighter blue and create extra paler ridges, mainly using ultramarine and some white, maybe a small amount of violet if you wanted to. Let's just put a couple of ultramarine and white highlights first, just to lighten up overall mountains. If some of these darker colors will stay, again, that will create us sub shadows, and let's benefit from it. If you ended up like me with darker color, that actually creates much interesting range of the depth. I'm going to chop it into the trees here a little, creating some of the extra silhouette patterns. Let me just make sure that it's not going to dry a lot darker again. I think it might. And just top it up with some extra white here. Paint over the boards here. And to be careful here not to clash with the color of the boards later on. Okay, our sky need to definitely be different in color to our mountains. So again, just vary that color so it doesn't look too similar to the sky. Yeah, I think some of my paler blue is drying already darker for some reason. I want to keep it light. Okay, that's a better darkness. Again, just trying to really vary those strokes, those highlights. I'm using a bit more violet now, because I think the loaded van, the boards on top of it will have loads more darker shadows. And what I've done, I've just made the right hand side mountain tiny bit lighter than the left hand side mountain, this one, and it does look like the sun is shining on it more as it's turned maybe a slightly different angle, which is an exciting development. Maybe just tiny bit on the tops here. I like those sharp edges. I started with very soft mountain ridges, and I don't think they were working as good. The colors are still underneath, and they're okay. They're giving us some positive color combinations. Okay, let's just play with that ridge there. Okay. That might be part of the sky or whatever it's going to be. It's going to be all loaded with a van's equipment. Okay, this is drying again. Yeah, for some reason it's drying slightly lighter than I wanted to stay. Maybe a bit too much water on my brush initially. Okay, now I'm much happier with the mountains. And I'll add a tiny bit of snow to the peaks here on the right hand side. Just going for fresh white. I wiped my brush, but I haven't washed it, and I've loaded it with a bit of white, so it doesn't look like a fresh white. And now let's just put a couple of dots and lines at some of the points. Now we need to have some sharp edges here if we want to create the snow line, and making sure that that snow line stays, can't have the snow sloping down more than other ridges, because it's the snow lines will melt elsewhere below that area. Okay, something like that. Again, if it's too much, maybe we can take some of it off. Okay, maybe just giving it a bit more of a glimpse rather than overly excited amount of snow. The more natural marks you'll make, the less recognizable the width of your brush is, or the sharpness, the width of the strokes, the sharpness of the borders, the better Okay, I don't like it again. So I'm going to take it all off and come back to it later on. My darker mountains look better at the moment than the ones with too much snow. Oh, I wiped off my extra blue. It looks even more impressive now. Ooh. Okay, that's okay there. Maybe I don't need much ice there. That looks exciting. Unintentionally wiped snow created me a darker peak. If your snow works well, keep it there. And don't follow me exactly as it is. Keep going for what works within your painting. I'm going to touch up the sky a tiny bit more and then focus on the boats and the van. So I'm coming back to violet, ochre, and white to touch up some of the highlights first of my sky. Okay, it's very light. Then I can add more water and go very runny, so then it will dry paler, or I can mix the colors solidly, but more precise. The accuracy of the tones I'm looking for, much more precise. So that a change of the darkness is not going to be a huge jump from one tone to another. Okay. Just enlarging some of the warmer highlights here. Little flick of the brush. Looking for some more softer tones rather than sharp edged type of tones. Tiny differences because everything else is ready. If you're not happy with it, not too sure, wipe it off. Smudge it, wipe it off, start again. I'll give you some space when you can come back to it. That's looking good. Tiny bit more somewhere, change of darkness. We've been painting a lot of clouds and skies recently, so hopefully we're getting a bit more closer to understanding how we can blend the tones, how we can make changes if something's gone wrong. Okay, I don't like that. Minor little things. But it's reflecting on the whole big picture of not overdoing this. Seeing the bigger picture of it all is more important. Okay. Okay, that's dried even darker than I expected, which is not what I wanted either. Okay, that's better. Maybe if I'll put a tiny bit of extra highlights here on the sky, when I get the boats, so the surfing boats on the top, maybe that's will give me an extra highlight. And the mountains here, the opposite, now they're dark. I really like them as they no, definitely don't like that snow there. I think I'm gonna keep my mountains dark. Dark. And anything extra light might just go into the area above. Right, that's enough of the sky. Let's move on to the foreground. Still looking similar shapes. Okay, that's better. Okay. Let's move to the foreground. Now, the foreground, I've got some beautiful sand, a very kind of darker version of the sand, and a little bit of grass, loads of combination of darker colors. Tiny bit of little whiter marks, and then just smudging them with a hint of water. That just gives a nice little ridges for some of the highlights in the center of the painting. I think that's quite a good effect. I think I want to do something tiny bit more here and maybe stop. Okay, that's good. Right, foreground. We'll go for, I'm going to exaggerate the lights of the sand here slightly. Otherwise my camper and my boats will end up being too dark. So ochre violet will be my key colors. Ochre violet, a little bit of white. And let's stay with more ochre than, so a bit more violet than ochre, and just tiny bit more extra light. Let's put some of the samples here of the colors we want. Okay, that looks way light. Now let's get it tiny bit darker. Okay, that's better. So all I'll do is a loose paint, not overly runny, but quite loose, quite soft. I'll find a big silhouette of this light shape. If you can see the background violet color coming through, that's good. If you leave some of it, that's good as well. All right, behind the boats, I think I'll put a tiny bit more light there as well. I need to be thicker for it to stay there. Anything else in the foreground here? Right, if I'll just drop my board a tiny bit more angle. How that might be connected. And there's loads of little green patches of dark green patches of grass here. How they've just been growing. If they're interrupting too much, I think I might have overpainted some of them. I'll come back to them then afterwards. Tiny bit of light behind the camper and the boats on a trailer, maybe something like that for now. And now it's become very obvious that I have forgotten the lake. So I'm back to painting some blue. If you squint your eyes, the lake looks way darker than the overall color of the sky. Now if we'll paint the camper and the lake similar colors, they look a bit similar on the photograph, we're going to lose them. So again, we need to make a decision of how we're going to make, what's the preference we're going to make. Now if I look at the lake here, it looks quite dark. So on the left hand side of the campervan, it looks a darker lake, maybe because we have the darker shadow of the mountain, maybe parts of the foreground is dark, but the lake, the gap of the lake we can see between the van and the trailer, and behind the trailer at the back is even lighter. So it looks like light lake, and getting much more darker on the left. So I think that might be my approach, making the lake contrasting with the mountains at the back. I'll make the lake more turquoisey than maybe it is. We were painting the lake last week of a similar type of color. So I'll go for phthalo blue and emerald green. If you don't have phthalo blue, just add more emerald green to your ultramarine and some white. So then my camper could have much more of a bluey color. Okay, that's going to be probably the right one. Tiny bit more blue, so I'll have more of a stronger turquoise color rather than green. Don't be scared of painting it more into the van. We can always establish the line for it. I'm going to work around the boats here. Tiny bit more white. My paint is not thick enough to cover, to create a nice layer without seeing the background. Also watch out for the horizon line of the lake. So it should stay straight. It shouldn't be going up or down a hill. It's very easy to do, to kind of not spot how even that line is going to be because of the small gap we have, small gaps we have. Loads of details around the boats, how they've been attached to the trailer. So what I'm going to do for the moment, I'm just going to paint around the boats. All the attachments are quite dark, so I can just paint over it and find that silhouette afterwards. But so far, let's find the lengths of the boats, widths of them. I think that will be a better solution for me here. Let's paint now the gaps here. I'm just blocking it. It's small, the small areas. Oops, wrong color. So we're looking for those beautiful silhouettes. Paint still staying quite transparent, and it darkens up as it dries. I'm interested to know why. It's been a recent case for me. Maybe I'm diluting it too much with water. Okay. On the most left-hand side, let's just make it a tiny bit more darker. Okay, that's one's there. Tiny bit more bluey green. A tiny bit more darker. Again, that turquoisey color makes the painting very dramatic. I'm just going to check my horizon line. Yes, it's gone a little bit up the hill. Let me just adjust it. No, this one needs to go lower. If it's any help, you can put a little bit of masking tape on a dry paint. Double check, maybe even measure where the line from the bottom of the edge of your board or paper. Find that height for it. Okay, that's better. Just have an edge to this ridge, a little bit more exciting. This is good. Okay, some sort of trees developing there as well. Okay, by the time there will be boats will be painted, we're hopefully not going to have a problem with them. Right, that's done. And let's come back to the foreground and warmer colors. I'm not decided. I've painted the foreground, the sand, but I'm not overly convinced that's my final color. That's the good color for us to keep. However, I can see the gorgeous orange colors on the canoes, and I think that painting them might give me an idea of how light or bright I need to go for the sand. So I'll add some yellow. I'm introducing two extra new colors, yellow and crimson, or pinky red. And that's when I'll go for smaller size brushes, but not tiny. I'm still going to paint in big shapes. So again, we're coming now to the stage of the painting where we want to work in blocks for little things. So how to paint individual, quite unique shapes without getting lost in the details. So I'm gonna mix some gorgeous orange color. I'm gonna go for cadmium yellow and my crimson with some white, maybe even quite a bit of white, because we don't want the color being transparent. We want quite a bit of body to it. For some of you, you might even need to paint the same color a couple of times for it to stay where we want it. So I'm going to start with the most bold orangey colors. I think the nose of this canoe might have it. Okay, I'll do a little shape for it. Okay, and this one's coming out even wider. So wider, yeah, a bit more on the right, on the left, sorry. It's there are two of them. Okay, there's one there, another will be slightly different in color. Okay, that shape now in the wrong place, so I can actually get rid of it. If I'll add more crimson, I can paint a little bit more of these canoes maybe at the back, or maybe somewhere close to the center, close to the openings. I know what I've done now. When I've been painting my lake, I shrunk the size of them, so I actually can exaggerate it, make them tiny bit longer. And tiny bit longer this one as well. That's why some of the proportions of my openings are not quite matching. So I'm going to go again for cadmium red and yellow and white, slightly more into the red, and probably almost just look for a tiny bit of that redness in the canoes, maybe around the seat. I think this is a double one. No, I think those are little storage areas. That's why they're dark, and I don't think those are seats. Okay, there. And the other one is more in the shadow, but I think I can do with some stronger red on the lower part of it, and maybe around the seat here on the bottom. So they're looking very strikingly bold. We will cool them off, and the van will be a little bit more supporting it as well. So So now I can go for the same colors and add violet to it. Yellow, crimson, and violet. You can, in this case as well, swap yellow for ochre. You'll start having a bit more duller type of yellowy color. So that's going to start being our shadows on our canoes. That looks too gray, so I might have more red in it. Making sure that I'm mixing my paint really well, so I have an even consistency of the color on the brush. Don't be scared of painting it quite in a simple form, in a simple shape. Go right. Let it dry, maybe repeat the process, or smudge it and repeat the process. There's a shadow here. A little bit of darkness. My hand is wobbling. Let's see if I can wipe this off. I can work into my shadows in a much more steady manner. A similar darker, the shadows I've been using, the color for the shadows, maybe more reddy version, red type of version for the canoes. Could help me establishing this little one. So two, one at the front, one at the back. Tiny bit more violet again for the shadow. Maybe even more violet. Okay, and we can come back to it afterwards. And that's that nose there. It looks like there's a highlight on it afterwards as well. But again, I'll come back to it shortly. I'm now interested to balance some of these oranges, maybe somewhere in the campervan from them, but I think bigger colors just again to match my boats in much more exciting manner. Tiny bit more white. So some sort of orangey color, but it's a shadow going to be on the front of the campervan. Some sort of triangle there as well. It looks slightly different color, more of a yellowy triangle, but I'm going to keep it similar to the canoe's colors. Again, just to help my painting. Doesn't have to be perfect triangle, no. Does it need to be as white as it's we might perceive it, no. I'll keep it of a similar reference color for now. If I'll paint it in blue and I think this is too much, then I'll get rid of it as well. Right, that's good. Right, so main orange has been introduced. Let's have a look how it reflects on our sand. I think the changes I'm going to make to my sand is a hint of red and violet mixed with some of the orange. So have a look at, okay, that looks too pinky. Okay, that's too orangey. Let's make it a tiny bit more duller in boldness. So let's go for more white and violet. Okay. Okay, that's too light, very possible a bit light, a bit more violet. Okay, if I'll wipe some of this off again. Okay, that's looking already better, kind of a diluted version of the cooler highlights. So what I might do, I might introduce a stronger color and then wipe it off to have the texture available, but not the tone, not as strong in tone. It's also not going to be as heavy.
Can you remind us what colours you use for that you just dusted?
That's ochre, violet, and some crimson with white. Okay, so that's the actual color, and I'm just blending it with some bit of water. I don't want my strokes to be the same, so I'm just smudging, creating some texture. The patches of grass I've missed out. I think it will be easier for me to come back to them rather than painting them now. I want that path, I think, coming slightly stronger here. That will be a good idea. That will be a little bit better. Okay, right, while you're doing that, so behind the camper, I'm gonna have a tiny bit of light for my path, I think, and see how that will focus the attention on, you know, the boldness of the orangey boats, and then a little highlight on the path by the camper will give us the focal point, kind of the dynamics moving of it. Right, let's move on into the camper itself. I'll start using now a flat diagonally trimmed brush. I really like it for getting in tricky, sharp corners. Right, camper. We need to be careful with the types of blues we'll be using. You can use whatever combinations you prefer, as long as they don't clash with the sky, with the mountains and the water. It depends what you've used. It might be slightly different to mine. I think tone-wise, it will need to be darker than the water. Okay. I will go mainly for phthalo blue and ultramarine with some white. That will be my starting point. I'll block the whole van in and make my decision on based on that, if that's a good color or if that's clashing with something else. So I'm going to mix them well. Because I'm trying the color, there is no point of me doing all the fine details around the windows or somewhere else. So I'll put the most important colors. The body of the van, avoiding my sticker. Again, I'm not going to do too fine details around the stickers. They're not important, and I might have not landed in the right color yet. What I can do, I can shrink the size of the windows. I think the music is getting louder. No? Okay. Big shapes. Okay, I think my tire is in the wrong place. Oh, actually, no, my campervan needs to be a bit more wider. That's what it is. I've just shrunk it with the water. So again, that's something for me to remember what I've done. Okay, maybe this window is going to be a slightly different place. That's okay. We can do that. The roof of the campervan is going to be white, but for now, I'll put a darker line because there will be some shadows there as well. The width of the van is slightly changing towards the bottom. It's getting slightly wider. I think, yes, my tire might need to be moved slightly forward. Big shapes, big shapes. Maybe this triangle need to be here. And anything at the front. Tiny bit running out of paint, so right, if I need to change the position of my tires, I'm just going to paint them over. I think that's a better one now. And then just reposition them with a darker color. I think I had violet and emerald green for the tires, for the kind of the shadows. They're a little bit neutralizing each other, so it doesn't look like anything green or doesn't look overly violet, but it gives us a nice darker shadow. So the tires are a little more forward, so I'm looking at the bottom space between the top edge of the bottom part of the campervan, where that space is going to be. Okay, somewhere there. I can paint some light areas afterwards, and where the second tire is going to be. Again, look at it for the shadow rather than try to find all the details, and you can paint it together with the shadow and even the details of the van, maybe some of the lights, big shapes. I've got this highlight underneath of the van. I'm going to get rid of it. While I'm into the dark color, I can touch up the correct size of my windows. Any other little dark marks on the van? I don't know if they're lights, if they're patterns, if they're handles for the doors, if they're connections for the boats. any patterns of dark could appear now. And the same color could go around my trailer as a shadow color for its connections. I don't really know the ins and outs of how the boat trailer works, but I can see something is attached in the center for the boat to hold on to. And I'm also interested in all the straps lines, which will show the directions of the kind of the body of the boat. I'm interested in dark patterns of areas open up for seating, or it's storage, or there are stickers, or there are nets, little marks. Some of these darks might be grays rather than very dark blacks or dark blues. So I'm going to try to create some exciting marks. Like this one needs to be a little bit more grayish. Or purplish. And some gorgeous silhouettes of the lines. Okay, maybe a tiny bit darker, back to the darks. And they're going to come here. Again, how they're attached. I think that looks like a little step ladder, or maybe just like other type of connections. If you're in doubt, don't do it. Or simplify the form. Or stick to a specific silhouette. There's something darker going over the boat. I'm tempted to make it paler gray, darker than my mountain, but not as black as it is on the photograph. And then maybe put some highlights and shadows to it. Otherwise, it's over dark shape might overwhelm my pattern. So what I'll do here, I'll put a highlight on the top of it. Maybe something like that. And tiny bit more shadows and some, sorry, highlights on some of these strings, just to give me a slight open view. It's there. Right, forgotten about the trailer's wheel. That's a nice and dark shape as well, and loads of dark shadows under the boat. Now, if you're not sure what's going on under the boat or anywhere else, don't paint the details, paint the big shapes. For example, here, under the orange boat, there are loads of different patterns of darkness. That's what I'm going to identify. I'm just going to paint it as little blocks of darkness. So there is, let's just mix the color well. It's coming up a little bit patchy. So a little dark block here. There's a gap, much wider all the way across block. It's coming close to the shadow. The shadow might merge as well. All of it staying together. Maybe it's resting on it. Maybe there is some other props while it's parked. I don't know. Okay, something going across there. Again, around big shapes, identify them. Again, little straps or little marks here. Okay, let's give it a bit more of a quirky feel. Used feel, those there might be straps holding it together, the two boats. Okay, that was a shadow for my initial shadow for the boat as well. Little highlights for the openings, maybe they're touching up some light. Some extra dark color again, green and violet. I think there's something pointy, like a roof over some of this trailer. Okay, maybe just how it connects. Okay. And some paler color for the tires here, for the tire. Okay, maybe a little bit something here. Maybe for the van's tires, just again, almost like a half circle, just to show the metal sections of the tires. This one you can see most of it, but I'll be careful not to do it all, just to show again the width of it. That looks quite nice. Any other gaps might be there, or you feel might be appropriate extra color. And now I'll start working into some highlights of the van. I'll have a pale gray color, so any of my blues, which are just on your palette, and add some white to it. So there might be little indentations or where the steps are, or how you step into the van. Maybe extra highlights on the windscreen, or the little edges, indentations within the bodywork. I need a tiny bit more extra light. This is not quite standing out. Okay. If there are highlights at the front, very settled. Now we'll have some much lighter tones on the top, but I will not make them too light yet. But overall, I can see the roof now because I just put a little bit lighter tone. The same tiny bit lighter tone gonna go around the windows at the bottom of the van. Okay. There might be an extra pattern design. Again, just makes it stand out a bit more exciting, a bit more natural. Now this triangle looks a bit too bold now. So what I'll do, I'm not going to get rid of it, but I'm going to put an extra writing on it. So it just takes away the attention from the boldness of the shape. So the textures staying, yeah, so the presence of orange is there. The van doesn't look as bare, but all the tones of the van, the van got a flat color. There's nothing else changes in it, just highlights on the edges. And these little orange things might just have things written on them. So usually the camper's got loads of stickers over them, little marks. They might be not perfect in there. Coloring, all these lovely drives, bumpy roads. It's become just too muddy. Might just simplify this. Actually, that's all wet paint. Might be easy for me to wipe it off rather than repainting it. Yes. And then just give it another go. Almost done. Almost done. I'm gonna put the boats in quickly. And final highlights. Right, my light boats. Sorry, my boats on the camper. I'm going to make them quite turquoisey, but dark turquoisey. So phthalo blue and ultramarine with some white. And I'll just do a couple of strokes for them. Looks like a pile of them there. All I'll need to do is just paint them as a block and then add some highlights when they're dry. So they're bending towards the left and right. Okay, tiny bit darker. So I'm adding more blue and some more green. And especially darker close to the sky. Even darker, it still appears very similar in darkness. Might leave some of my initial sketching lines, which are quite light, give me a bit of highlights there as well. That's good. Just touching up anything else here. Right, that's all looking good. Highlights within camper. Now every window will have different highlights. Now they're quite dark windows, but if we'll add a small amount of gray to them, reasonably dark gray, let's say something's at the front, maybe a little line or mark, maybe something else. It just makes the windows immediately not solid black, but gives that depth behind. So it's more likely to be tinted windows. People don't want to be seen there. Highlights on the top of the camper. I'm going for bolder white now on my brush. Probably put the 3 segments because there are attachments to the roof, and the highlight here at the back as well, making the roof nice and round. If I wanted to do lights, I can put a couple of marks, but I think I'm just going to leave a little bit of extra, just highlights again. And there, and just blend in with light more than anything else. Anything else? Maybe a tiny bit more highlights on the under the windows. Again, just seeing how things are drying. And my I've just added 2-3 lines across the surfing boards, paddling boards. Okay, those are little paddling, steering little marks for all of this. Okay, we're almost there. Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? I think it's a tiny bit of grasses at the front, which I'll go for fresher green. than it was in the photograph. Emerald green and ochre with some ultramarine, making it super dark green. And I just patch it up at the foreground here. Darker colors. Camper, but not too close under to give it that shadow. Okay, touching up a little bit more the front here again. Varying the strokes so they're not going to be too repetitive. This might be a little bit, okay, that's come out a bit lighter than elsewhere. I think I just turn the brush around and I just end up with slightly different color on the other side of the brush. So let's just top that one up. If we overdo it, we can wipe some of it off, which I think I'll do a tiny bit here. My strokes, some of them appearing a little too similar as well in gaps and in size. So if I'll just go with my tissue and wipe some of them off. This gives much more natural effect as well. And rotate my brush so the shapes don't appear too similar again. And also I'll do a border for where the lake is coming close to our camper, yeah, this side of the shore, by the road, by the paths here. I think I'll just do a tiny bit more darker marks, identifying some maybe tiny bit more grasses. We're done. Okay, no, I don't need that one. Just introduce slightly lighter green and it's not working. I thought I might just do a tiny little catch up of light, but no, that's all very nice and good. Right, I think we're done, folks.
Julia, would you?
Today, yes.
Julia, would you actually introduce a wing mirror of on the camera?
It's a little thing like that. Yes, I could do. I've just spotted actually for that. Probably connection to the camper and trailer. I'm sure they might. Yeah, they will be connected there. And a little, yeah, things like the pole sign. Do I need it? I can put it if I wanted to. I think I probably will need tiny bit of shadows on the lake here. Yes, and those two details could be here as well. Well spotted, Kwan. Otherwise, the rest is finished. Yeah.
Yes, it's lovely.
The overall painting of those details, yeah, complex amount of details. But if you paint the van flat as a color, and then just add highlights at the top, shadows at the bottom, almost like silhouettes, you've seen shapes without telling too much details, without telling too explicit details of the, you know, how many lights are there, or how many door handles, or what the writing is like. So never be put off by painting cars or vehicles or something super complex like boats. See them as chunks of trees or chunks of rocks or chunks of mountains if you're used to painting those elements. Yeah, and then you're on track. Right, I've got a tiny bit more darker tone here for darkening my water here. I think just looks a little bit bare, and that's will create some highlights on the water as well. Just be careful not to clash with the van, with the van's highlights or the textures of the van. That will be the main key. van is more important than the water. Water is supporting the van structure. Right, I think that's getting too dark now. So close to the van, I need to stay paler. Right, if it didn't work at this stage, it's easier to wipe it off rather than repainting it. That was all correct colors first. I just want a gentle darkness. Maybe actually I'll put some highlights on it instead of making it darker. So then the van stands out more as a silhouette. Let's do that way. Okay. Yes. That looks better. And then extra tiny highlights could go and give me a connection with this area. Will be very settled there. Right, let's put a connection between the trailer and the van. Violet and green, emerald green together. Again, it gives me a nice dark color. That's some sort of, to be honest, I have got this dark line here anyway. So what I'll do, I'll just put some couple of wider marks and that should do the trick. That's done. I don't even want to fine tune anything else on the boats here, maybe just a little bit of extra marks which might represent some of the writing. And the wind mirror, again, just make sure that your water is dry before you do it. Looking at a shape of it going wider down and then a tiny narrow one going across. So I'm going to flatten my brush, maybe just get a tiny bit of water on it. If I don't like it, I can wipe it off. And I'll just put it a bit more horizontally so I can see it horizontally there. Okay, here we go. I think there's some lights sticking out here as well. I'll keep them as a silhouette rather than painting them the exact colors. Anything else? All the rest is just minor little messing about details, which I think are done. Anyway, right, my window's gone a bit wobbly here. Let's tidy it up. That's it. We're finished.